say, I want to reopen my mortgage, take some of the money out of my mortgage, and I want to be able to use that money to fix my roof in hurricane season. Nothing has happened, Mr. President. You have not had any issues with your roof, but you know that in hurricane season, you have some vulnerabilities and you want to have money freed up to do what you need to do. You may have a child at 18, 17, and you're thinking, but boy, my child, when they finish school next year, they want to go to university, and they want to go to Canada, or to the UK, or to someplace further afield where UWI fees that this government reinstituted in 2018 don't apply. So you may have to pull your pocket to send your child to university outside of the university system, depending on what they want to do. And you say, but boy, I want to make sure I got some more money put down to be able to provide for this child come next year so that they could go off to school to university. We do these things as Barbadian households all the time. And what the government is presenting here today is akin to that, with larger numbers, looking at how we manage our liabilities, looking at how we manage our debt, looking at what is maturing when, and programming those funds accordingly. But the government is also freeing up space to pay not for your child at 18 to go to university in Canada, but to make sure that the $72 million that we spend every year to the University of the West Indies, the government is able to account for that. The government is making sure that it has the cash flow within its existing budget to make sure that the large social safety net, which includes the welfare program, the One Family program, the expansion of hospice care, and all of those things, that the government has money to be able to do that. The government is making sure that it has money in place to make sure to cater to the needs of Barbadians so that we can drive on smooth roads. The government is making sure that our ordinary everyday needs are provided for in our fiscal space. We call it creating fiscal space, putting more money in the government's hand to be able to protect the society. But then there's another layer to that, Mr. President. Now, I talked about the homeowner who is concerned about hurricane season. I talked about the homeowner who is thinking, well, hurricane season is coming, and I don't know. They keep talking about all of these hurricanes that are coming, and they're faster, and they're more furious, and there are more of them, and they're more ferocious. I want to make sure I protect my household and my family. This government, Mr. President, wants to protect Barbados against the headwinds that are coming all around us. Now, in 2019, February, the headwind of COVID came our way, and we saw that expenditure outstripped revenue, so the government had to manage that. Then we saw another headwind coming, Mr. President. We didn't have enough warning. We had an ash fall. We had a volcano next door. But then, Mr. President, we didn't see another volcano or another pandemic. But, Mr. President, we accounted for them in our fiscal measures. So this measure that is before us in this fiscal liability management accounts for the possibility that a pandemic could come again, or a natural disaster could come again, and it allows for the government to have the ability to suspend principal payments during those periods. So that's what the government has done. It is the same thing, Mr. President, at a national level of a person attempting to protect their household in advance and before something happens. Then it gets even more detailed, Mr. President, because the headwinds that we were talking about, pandemics, natural disasters, are accounted for in clauses in this liability management bill, resolution, facility. They're included in all of our debt management facilities, Mr. President. But what accounts for the war in Russia and Ukraine that then caused prices of all kinds of products to spiral out of control? What accounts, Mr. President, for the war in the Middle East? As I watched the Middle East over the last couple of days, weeks maybe, but certainly the last couple of days, I remember, Mr. President, one of my best friends in the world For the last several years, she lived in Kuwait. And I said to her in our girls' chat a few weeks ago, you know, I trust God with my life. I do. And I trust him with yours. Because just a few years before, you were in Kuwait and you thought about the possibility of taking up an offer to work at a school in the UAE in Abu Dhabi. And you were so excited by that thought. And then somehow, some way, a school in Bangladesh was so aggressive about recruiting you. She's Jamaican, she's not Bajan. And between Abu Dhabi and the school in Bangladesh, they pushed and had a bidding war for her. She ended up switching away from going to Abu Dhabi and she went to Bangladesh instead. And I messaged her in our chat this week and I said to her, God always had a plan. He always has a plan. We catch up afterwards. And I said to her, as I look at flights being suspended to Dubai, airspace being closed over Doha, ships being pulled out of Bahrain, and on we go in the Middle East, I am so thankful that you are in Bangladesh and that your heart shifted for reasons that you did not know to take you out of the Middle East. But who could have anticipated that what we saw evolving between Israel and Palestine would morph into a wider Middle Eastern war, affecting then Lebanon, affecting now Iran, and how it pulls the rest of the Middle East region together with it. We saw the news of the various back and forth responses that went among the countries, but how do those things then impact global stability and predictability? And the markets got skittish. Countries got skittish. Development partners had to maintain stability, and countries had to make decisions. What did the Barbados government decide to do, Mr. President? The Barbados government decided to plan in advance and to account in advance for what could come down the pipeline if the same type of disruption that we saw as a result of COVID, that we saw as a result of the ashfall, that we are still experiencing as a result of Ukraine and Russia, if that continues in the Middle East as well. You are mitigating against risk at this point. This is really what we're talking about, mitigating against risk and attempting to put Barbados in a position where we do not fall prey to the challenge of not having fiscal space to respond to the needs of our people, the social needs of our people, the education needs of our people, the health services needs of our people, but the day-to-day living needs of our people, Mr. President. It is the reason why, despite the ridicule coming from some quarters in terms of the foreign reserves that Barbados has held, Barbados has made sure to hold overly healthy reserves. Because while those who play fast and loose and who have the luxury of sitting on the outside and not actually being accountable or responsible to the people for protecting those people, this government has to be responsible because we are also accountable. So the voices that talk about, oh, how much reserves they have and so on, and whether they'll free up some of the reserves, they're the ones who caused this government to have to take on one of the facilities that is being prepaid in this liability management operation. When the Eurobond was taken out in 2018, Mr. President, the Eurobond was taken out to account for the debt that we encountered upon taking office in 2018. That Eurobond would have expired and come and matured, and you heard the Honorable Prime Minister speak about it in the other place last night. That had to be accounted for. So this government wasn't just planning for today and playing fast and loose. This government is planning for tomorrow. That's a fact. So this liability management exercise has two components, and I've just referred to one. The payments of $340 million to retire 84% of the government of Barbados' existing 2029 bond. That's a Eurobond. That is the bond that held the restructuring of 2018 coming out in the 10 years of the previous administration, and that is being retired ahead of schedule. The second element of this liability management, Mr. President, to be able to protect our fiscal space, to mitigate against the risks of what may be coming down the pipe, and to ensure the government has fiscal space to spend on Barbadians, is the repayment of approximately $142 million of the principal maturities due to the International Monetary Fund. Is it being paid on schedule? No. It is being paid ahead of schedule. The government is taking a frontal approach. Prime Minister always tells us, take things on the front foot. Don't wait until it comes down the pipe to be able to respond. What was the objective of this bond issuance, Mr. President? The operation is meant to free up approximately $372 million in net terms for the remainder of 2025 through calendar year 2026. So over the next 2 years, it gives Barbados a buffer, a cushion, a risk mitigator of $372 million. This significant reduction in outflows from the country will also help the government and the central bank that is responsible for fiscal management to ensure that we can maximize our reserve levels over the period, to boost our resilience to external shocks, and to support our work so that we can benefit from continued upgrades from the international agencies. Now, historically, the last time that the country did this was in 2006. And you heard the minister in the Ministry of Finance speak about that in the other place when he spoke yesterday. Now, if people in this chamber were to think about going to the banks may have a certain interest rate. If you are a good customer, if you had repaid your debts, if you have demonstrated good fiscal management of your own affairs, they will give you a loan. Most of us then see the credit rating bureaus in our personal affairs and making it deliberately connected to our household affairs. When we go to the when we go to the banks or the credit unions, they tell you that they have, and they put a charge in the facility that you are applying for you to go and get, for them, I should say, you're paying for it, but they're going to go to the credit rating bureau to assess what kind of risk you are. Mr. President, the Oinaka administration, as it was in 2006, would have gone to the market and it would have done the last bond issuance. In 2010, under the last government, there was also a specific loan. Everybody remembers that loan. And we remember it because there was a balloon payment that was coming up immediately after the election of May 2018 that would have seen Barbados's foreign reserves depleted almost in their entirety and putting the Barbados dollar in peril. That loan facility, at a time where there were concerns among the international rating agencies, just like we have a credit bureau, Fitch, we talk about Fitch and Moody's and those kinds of things, but they're no different, Mr. President, than when we go to get a credit rating, to get a loan from a bank. If you're a good customer, you typically get a good response and you get a good interest rate. If you're not a good customer, then inevitably you end up finding yourself in places like loan sharks, where your interest rate in the shortest possible time frame is extraordinarily high. That is what happened when in 2010, this loan was undertaken, Mr. President, and the interest rate at the time was over 12%. And it meant, Mr. President, that the fiscal management of the country at the time was so regarded by the credit rating agencies that they had an extraordinarily high interest rate. That's what we got. And it put Barbados in peril and our dollar in peril by 2018, when that payment would have been due in June of 2018, forcing the government to begin this process that has still continued of the debt restructuring, including, Mr. President, the 2029 Eurobond that we're referring to here. So has this government therefore demonstrated, with all of the interest rates in a period of low interest rates and now rising interest rates, and I'm going to come to that for a moment, that they have had solid management, fiscal management of the country's affairs? Absolutely, Mr. President. And we have not just said so. This administration has made sure that the credit rating agencies, in the same way that we have Carrie Chris and others who view us and give a report on us to the bank, that those who look at sovereign debt is what is called, what government debt is called, whether it is Moody's, whether it has been Fitch, whether it has been Standard & Poor, their report on Barbados has in all instances been positive post-2018. And we have seen the reversal of circumstances where in 2010, you got this huge loan, massive interest rate, major bullet payment, put the fiscal position of the country in peril, and also the dollar in peril, the Holy Grail in peril, and now you have switched and gone 180 degrees to do the opposite, where every single rating agency, every single development agency, and now, Mr. President, for the first time since 2006, in a solid demonstration of confidence, Mr. President, confidence, there are those who would wish to pretend that confidence is not there. But I am certain that as I heard the Honorable Minister of Finance speaking in the other place on this matter, he talked about this, Mr. President. He said, you know, and I remember when Cabinet approved the non-deal roadshow, they went on the road. It was the entire finance team led by the Prime Minister and the advisors that have anchored us through 2018 to now with the return of confidence to Barbados. And it was meant to be a no-deal roadshow. At the time, they wanted to kind of, I guess we would call it, test the waters, see what's out there, be able to figure out, so here's what we are proposing in risk mitigation. Let's see what the market tells us. And despite the loud shouts from some quarters that there's no confidence in Barbados, not just the IMF said it, not just the World Bank said it, not just the rating agencies said it, but hear what now? The bond market investors said it. And this bill, this resolution before this chamber today, speaks about $500 million that is being proposed. But the Honorable Minister in the other place, he said this, that when they put out the tender after the non-deal roadshow was completed, that the tender, publicly issued, people from all over responded. And you know, sometimes when people, sometimes there are circumstances where people want to come and throw money at you. You know, when you have an artist that is exciting and everybody wants to sign this artist and they're excited by it. And so they come and they say they offer you more and more and more. Over $2 billion, Mr. President, over $2 billion was offered as almost, you can call it almost an expression of interest in response to the tenders. You almost call it that. If that is not an expression of confidence, then somebody is living in a parallel universe where truth is false and where false is truth. But you know, we've been having this environment where there are those that live in their own echo chamber. So they're not interested in what the government has to say, but they would want the public to believe them. But the public doesn't have to depend on either side of the political divide in this country. The public can depend on independent agencies that are not local and have a vested interest, but they are global. So when you cast aspersions on whether or not Barbados has the confidence to attract investment, you are in fact attempting to say that you know better than Moody's, you know better than Fitch, you know better than the World Bank, you know better than the IMF, you know better than all of the institutions globally, whoever they are, and we should listen to you alone and disregard all of these entities that have solid credentials in global fiscal management. So, Mr. President, I've spoken already about the mitigation, I've spoken about the natural disaster and the pandemic clauses, and I've spoken about why it is being done. Let me get into the specifics as I come closer to the end. This particular issuance, Mr. President, will carry an interest rate of 8%. It will have a 5-year grace period on principal, and it will be followed by 10 equal payments of that principal. The final maturity of this facility will be in June of 2035, and the higher interest rate on the new bonds when compared to the existing 6.5 bonds due in 2029 is due to the following. 1A, the maturity, which is 5.5 years longer in weighted average terms, and B, the increase in underlying USD interest rates, which globally have increased by approximately 2.8 percentage points since the 2929 bond was issued in 2019. There are approximately, Mr. President, 90 international, not 19, but 90 international bond investors. What was I talking about a few moments ago, Mr. President? Confidence in Barbados. International bond investors. And afterwards, I guess you would call it a secondary offering, it is going to be listed on the Luxembourg Stock Exchange for public trading. Made available, Mr. President. By prepaying the IMF loan, Mr. President, there are 3 things that we're hoping to be able to do. Eliminate the need to repay principal to the IMF between July 2025 through the end of June 2027. I started out by saying, Mr. President, the government is creating fiscal space to make sure that it can anticipate and have room given the headwinds that we are seeing geopolitically. Secondly, it is meant to reduce the government's borrowing from the same IMF from its current level at 505% of its quota down to just above 300%, providing room, if need be, for new emergency facilities in the event specifically of a natural disaster. It's also meant, and we know this, Mr. President, even if you had a student revolving loan, you know that you pay back the principal, you have a reducing balance on your interest. It's meant to reduce the interest to be paid to the IMF, including on the prepaid maturities, and to eliminate the time-based interest surcharges, thereby cutting the surcharges roughly in half, 50%. So, Mr. President, debt service matters. The ability to be able to service our debt matters to Barbados. It matters to this government. And the ability to service this debt is, one, about our reputation. May Barbados never return to the days where we were seen as a pariah in fiscal spaces. May we never return to those days, Mr. President. I know that the average Barbadian felt that keenly. It is also meant, Mr. President, that Barbados has the ability to spend on social services, to spend on people, to address the issues that concern people on a day-to-day basis. And overall, Mr. President, by focusing on the combination of debt management, i.e. liability management, and simultaneously on the growth agenda, which is the investment in sectors, key sectors, Mr. President, including the new investments in life sciences, the new investments in the agro-processing firm, the establishment for Barbados of a logistics hub, focusing on growth to be able to generate revenue, growing the global business sector, Mr. President, to be able to create that balance between revenue and expenditure and debt management in order to be able to ensure that people can come first. You can't spend more than you earn. If you earn $100 and you're spending $1,000, Mr. President, then you're back into the period of between 2010 and 2018. 2008 and 2018. If you are spending more than you are earning, if you have no growth trajectory, if you have no investment in the productive sectors, as I speak right now, Mr. President, I am here because of the Senate. But I was really meant to be joining the other members of the productive sectors right now on mission to be able to identify alternate suppliers. And why? Risk mitigation. When countries find themselves in geopolitical challenges and different markets are facing difficulties, if, Mr. President, as we are seeing in some of the farm labor programs, you have the persons who are brought from across the region and elsewhere working in those farm labor programs, and they're being deported or they're being restricted from coming. The expectation, Mr. President, is that you may find yourself in a position where output is reduced, and then when output is reduced and you have to service your domestic needs, what happens, Mr. President? Export restrictions. If you're a tradesman or you're watching these things, you're uncomfortable. So what is Barbados looking to do? Again, risk mitigation. So if you're not buying from A, or if you are unable to buy from A, who else should you be buying for? We don't sit and wax philosophical on the outside of these things. We are responsible for fixing them and anticipating what could come. And so a team, as we speak now, is on the ground overseas looking at and meeting, and I'm seeing the messages coming in on my phone, including the commerce team and the small business team, to be able to look at where alternative supplies, in particular for goods that Barbados can source from other jurisdictions in the event that we are unable to source from traditional markets. That is what is happening. As I stand here today, Mr. President, we have an entity that is on retainer to the government, to the ministry, and they have been working with us on our global business outlook, and they have worked instrumental in crafting how we go about the corporation tax reform processes. We are in the process now of finalizing a pivot strategy. I call it that, a pivot strategy. In the event that we can't go here, do we go there? And what is the impact by tariff line, Mr. President, of the primary products that this country imports? Where do we buy them from? What is the impact of the current trade war on those tariffs? How can we source them from alternate suppliers? How do we look then at shipping routes, whether the shipping routes align with these new suppliers? What does Barbados want to put ourselves in a position to do? All of that work is happening as we speak. All that's risk mitigation, Mr. President, all of that. And that's just a snapshot because I don't have the time to go into all. I could be here all day if I needed to do that. So, Mr. President, I want to commend this facility and this bill, this resolution, to this honorable chamber. I want to commend this government's management of this country's fiscal affairs to this honorable chamber. I want to commend this government's need to ensure that we are balancing our fiscal affairs, our debt management, our revenue generation affairs with our social obligations to people and putting people first. I am not going to stand here, Mr. President, and attempt to mammagai Barbadians into thinking that the government has the answers for cost of living and all of the things that are external, because when prices go up externally, we import those prices and we have to mitigate them. But I am going to say confidently that this government has attempted that as long as it comes within our jurisdiction, every available measure that is available to the government, we will put in place and we will take those actions to protect Barbadians. But bracing for shocks, we are. Anticipating shocks, we are. Mitigating against shocks, we are doing that. And that, Mr. President, is what this particular resolution, as part of the overall arsenal of the government, is about to do. And I beg to move that this resolution do now pass, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Cummings. Senator Walters.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. President. The Honourable Senator found it, in my opinion, very difficult to get the support of those on her side during her speech. Everyone seemed distracted, and I did not see one sign of support for what she was saying. But I listened, Mr. President, and like the leader of government business, this is a simple resolution, and we need to keep it simple. The resolution, purpose of the resolution, Mr. President, is to raise $1 billion Barbados dollars on the international market. $1 billion Barbados dollars on the international market, 500,000 US dollars. 500 million US dollars, Mr. President.